Thank you so much for being here tonight. I am Michelle Jeske. I'm the city librarian and executive director of the Denver Public Library. And I'm really, really grateful that you are joining us on this snowy day here in Denver. Obviously, we wish we could all be together in person downtown, but this is still an exciting program, and I appreciate you joining us here online tonight. And of course, these virtual meetings always provide the ability for more people to participate from across the city, the state, and probably even the country. So welcome. Before we begin, I want to ensure that you know you can enable closed captions by clicking the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. And if you experience technical difficulties, library staff are available in the chat to help, so please do seek support if you need it. We are so grateful that you are here tonight for this exciting author event. This is a really wonderful time to be part of the Denver Public Library. We believe that a strong library helps create a strong community, and thanks to you, our supporters, past, present, and future, we have a lot in the works to make our library even stronger. We are incredibly grateful to Denver voters for passing Measure 2I in November 2022, which established the DPL Fund, which we also call Strong Libraries, Strong Denver. Thanks to this funding, we are able to bring even more library services to our community. Already, we've been able to extend hours, improve services, and launch some new resources for customers. Over time, you will even see more expanded hours, programs, and services, new items in our collection, better paid staff, and improvements to our facilities. In fact, this evening's event was made possible thanks to Strong Libraries, Strong Denver. Thank you, Denver voters, our supporters, and our donors. Without you, we could not realize our full potential. We also thank our friends at the Bookies for handling book sales tonight. The link for this will be in the chat several times over this evening. Every book that is purchased will be signed by Stacey. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's speakers. Author Stacey May-Yan Fong is a home baker and author living in Brooklyn, New York, although she's here in Denver with us tonight, even though we're online. She was born in Singapore, lived in Indonesia, grew up in Hong Kong, and moved to the States to pursue a degree from the Savannah College of Art and Design. She spent a decade designing in the fashion industry, and during that time, she launched her 50 Pies, 50 States project, which led to her slinging pies at 4 and 20 Blackbird's Pie Shop. Now her pies have been featured by Good Morning America, CBS Sunday Morning, NPR, Eater, and beyond. Tonight, Stacey is in conversation with Sinabu Sohai, Senior Manager at Focus Point's Kamal Heritage Food Incubator, which supports immigrants and refugee entrepreneurs in the Denver community. The Earn While You Learn model gives participants the opportunity to learn what it is like to run a commercial kitchen. It is located directly across the street from DPL's Bob Ragland branch in the Rhino neighborhood. Give it a visit if you haven't already. It's really delicious, and you can always stop by our newest branch library while you're there. Now, let's enjoy a great conversation. And again, thank you for being here with us tonight. Over to you two.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Michelle, for those wonderful introductions. And thank you, Stacey, for making the travel, although we couldn't meet in person, but we are still in the same area, and you get to experience all of what Colorado has to offer with spring being around the corner. How was your travels?
60 degrees yesterday and then like full snow today. I can't be mad. I'm always happy to make it to Colorado, but do I wish I was in a room with all of you guys eating pie? 100%. But am I wearing soft clothes underneath this table? I am. And so, yeah, I can't get mad at that either.
Right. Fuzzy socks for all while we're comfortable.
Fuzzy socks for all, exactly.
A great conversation regarding your book, which I must say is a adventure all in itself. I mean, page by page, I'm not even done looking at all the recipes, but it feels like I'm visiting with each story and each pie and the wonderful pictures, every state in this adventure. And I hope that one day I'll be able to actually do it. So let's get started because I am a ball of questions.
Well,
And
let's go. I'm ready.
yes, so the top one that kept coming to mind when I was looking through your book is you're talking about your journey and your travels and your upbringing, but why pie? Why tell your story? And that is the medium that you chose to use.
So the beauty of pie is that it can be sweet or savory. And also in like the process of figuring out like what home meant to me, like it's a lot of like emotional things that you have to go through, right? Like when you're little, like you get told like, oh, like home is a physical space, like where you live. But really like the concept of a physical space was never something that like I was familiar with because I moved so much as a kid, like whether it was like apartments or countries and places, like what's a thing that could like tether me to a place, and that was like food, right? Like a certain thing would like
Mhm.
bring you back to a certain moment. And so when I decided that I was going to apply for my permanent residency in the States, I was like, what's a really fun way for me to like just like figure out what home means to me, and then also like eat my way through the states, because oftentimes when people travel, like you go to like Italy, you go all these places, Portugal, like you go and look at the food in all of these places that you want to try. People rarely do that in the state that they're like in the country that they live in, and in America
Mhm.
like they kind of like have this blanket idea of what American food is, and really the 50 states can be 50 different countries. And what better way for me to figure this out than by talking to people through the food that comes from each state, and then how I could like interpret all those thoughts and like filter them through was through pie, because pie can be savory or sweet. It's essentially like a blank canvas. I was born and grew up in a British colony where pie was more of a savory thing to me, so like sweet pie was kind of foreign. And so like exploring sweet pies, exploring savory pies, and yeah, I just wanted it to be a delicious yet emotional journey that I could eat one slice at a time. And I feel, yeah, that's what I did with my cookbook.
I love that. I love that. It reminds me of like smelling like my grandmother or a certain perfume or the feeling of a warm place if you grew up in
Mhm.
that kind of area. And I do agree, like all our 50 states could be its own, its own country. And they definitely are very proud of their states. And there's a lot of territorial when it comes to like the selection of pies. And I'll get into that in a little bit. But for those who haven't read your book, and as you're telling your story about finding home and all your travels, can you elaborate just a little bit what your journey was, your upbringing, your moving, and how you ultimately landed here?
Yeah, so it's a funny kind of long story, but I was born in Singapore. I lived there for a couple years before I moved to Indonesia. And then I ended up moving to Hong Kong when I was 5, and that's where I grew up most of the time. But during that time, I like lived in Hawaii for a little while because of my dad's job. My dad was in the hotel business, so I got to travel lots of different places, eat many delicious food. And so like I was exposed to many different things. And so like how we all discovered like things to do with different countries was through food. No one in my family is particularly good of a cook, but we're all really good at eating. So that definitely helped in like my journey of like developing my taste buds and like figuring stuff out. And when it came to applying for college, it was follow all my friends that are going to school in England, because I went to a British school in Hong Kong, or like just for the one time in your life where you can kind of make this big change, like with little consequence, like go to college in America. And this is a funny story where I was obsessed with the CW teen drama One Tree Hill. And in an episode of One Tree Hill, they mentioned the Savannah College of Art and Design. And my friends were like, you should apply. And I was like, where is Savannah? So it's like us in Hong Kong, Googling where Savannah, Georgia was. We find out, and I was like, yeah, I'll apply, that seems fun. So imagine me going to like my college advisor in my high school in Hong Kong being like, could you get me the college brochure for the Savannah College of Art and Design? And like I applied to schools in New York too, but I thought, you know what, I'm going to take this great adventure, I'm just going to go in cold and see what happens. And like taking that risk was like the best decision I've ever made in my life. By going to Savannah and like getting completely out of my comfort zone, I've met so many people, a lot of them featured in the book. And it allowed me to like explore this whole part of America that I was not familiar with. And also it brought me the opportunity to kind of like talk to different people of all different walks of life because if you only go to like your LAs and your New Yorks, like you're kind of only exposed to one little bubble. But going to school in the South, like I met so many different people from so many different states. And yeah, it was kind of wild at the time, but now seems was like the complete right thing for me to do. And then it brought me all the way here to you guys.
Awesome. That's a really, really wonderful story. Um, and you mentioned about pie being savory, and
Mhm.
going to a British school, and I know the mince pies and all that kind of stuff. But in your journey through pie and where you are now in life, what is a pie? What team are you on? Savory, sweet, all of the above?
I mean, I feel like I'll always be team savory because I love being a little salty. But I'll never say no to like a warm apple pie a la mode. Like I kind of, whenever someone asks me like, oh, like what's your favorite kind of pie? I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this, but I like to play a game of Fuck, Marry, Kill. And like you always marry an apple pie because that's someone that's like dependable. And then like a one night stand would be like a cherry pie. And then a pie I would kill would probably be grasshopper. The first time I had a grasshopper pie, I was like, this is really
Mhm.
weird and the texture is strange. But I'll try any pie once. And so a pie to me is just like I like a circular thing that has crust. Yeah. Like has it can be a single crust or a double crust. But
Double
yeah.
crust.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried a pie that you would not try again?
No.
No, all of them.
Yeah, no.
That is
I've barely
awesome.
met a pie I didn't like because so you know how bad cake is really bad? Even bad
Hmm.
pie is still good. Because like if you want like if even if you get like a terrible pie at the grocery store, if you just warmed it up and put a little ice cream on it, it's still great. Well, it's like you can't
Yeah.
save a bad cake.
Even if it's like messy and the crust falls in, like
Yeah,
it's still good.
it's still good.
You're right,
Exactly.
especially if it's like warm and some ice cream on it. And
Yeah.
like I agree, there's no such thing as a bad slice of pie.
Yeah.
I did see another theme in your book though, which is there's a lot of music and a love of music in your book. If you could select one, I know it's hard, what would be your favorite song that you play while you're making pie? And
I
not the
mean,
one when you make mistakes, but a good
not the
jam.
one I mean, it would I feel like it's a toss up between one of my favorite songs is like Atlantic City by the band,
Mhm.
originally by Bruce Springsteen, but their cover I think is better. Don't tell anybody in New Jersey. And always Dolly Parton. Like any live Dolly Parton album is like the perfect album to listen to because she talks to you too. And so it's like it feels like she's with you while you're baking. And I am also obsessed with Dolly Parton, so I want her with me at all times.
That's awesome. I love Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
And,
I
and
mean,
do you like
like,
blast your music while you're making it? It's like a whole total like jam session and you're like singing
yeah,
along with it.
music is a big deal. Like to me, I love music. I always have. Like my dad's really into music too. So I grew up listening to a lot of the stuff. Like he grew up as a teenager in the 70s. So it was a lot of um, like Simon and Garfunkel and Led Zeppelin and all of that stuff. But what I have come to really love is old country music because old country music is like fabulous storytelling, like John Prine, Merle Haggard, Willie Nelson, like they're Dolly Parton, they're telling all these like wonderful stories about like snippets of everyday life or like things that have happened to them. And that's like what I'm trying to do through pie, but they're doing through song in a very like eloquent, beautiful way. So yeah, old country music is probably my favorite kind of music.
That is awesome. I love that. I just saw that theme going through your book. And I knew your dad had shared that love as well. But circling real quick back to your travels, your theme is 50 pies, 50 states. And I know one of your adventure goals is to visit each state and make new friends in every state and all those things. And you haven't had a chance to visit all of them yet. Of the ones you haven't visited yet, what are a couple of them that are really high on your list? And why do you want to see them first?
Probably Alaska and Montana. I don't know if like those would be like the obvious answers, but like it would be so wonderful to be like in Alaska like in the summer and just like with my feet hanging off a dock, listening to music and just like looking at the earth and how wonderful it is. And like, I do also want to take a nap by a body of water in Montana. So maybe everybody just thinks that I just want to sleep at all these different places, which maybe, yeah, I do. But
Napping and pie
napping and eating
and a good
pie. But
jam.
yeah, it'll be Montana and Alaska. I just feel like those are like places that are like so mysterious to me and feel like the landscape and everything is so foreign.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's probably the top two.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. I love that a lot. When you were selecting the states and the pies that went with each state, can you explain a little bit about your process, why you selected each particular pie for each state? And has anyone ever told you that you got it wrong? And what was that like?
People have told me that I've gotten it wrong. Let's start with that. But I think what I love to say is like, this is my journey through the 50 states. This is my road trip. This is what I wanted to do. I'm not saying that this is like the be all end all for that state. And I honestly like invite like people to tell me what they would have done for their state or like why they think I got it wrong because it is hard to capture like a whole state. Like states are so large. Like Texas, for example, is massive. Like, could
Right.
I really capture like the heart of Texas in one pie? No. Like, could I go back and bake another one? Like, a lot of the time there were like so many ideas floating around. But how I kind of started it was each state, because America does this. There's like a state like food, fruit, or like some sort of regional cuisine that's tied to that state. So that's kind of like my jumping off point. And then something that I did with the book was I dedicated each pie to someone that I knew from that state. So I would talk to the person that the pie was going to and kind of talk to them about like what their food memories were growing up. Like, for example, West Virginia is based on the pepperoni roll, which is something that my friend Jeffrey ate growing up there. It's something that Italian immigrants brought over to West Virginia, and it's
Mhm.
like a yeasted bread with a log of pepperoni in it. And the funny part about me discovering the pepperoni roll was that when I was growing up in Hong Kong, I was eating something similar, and it was like the Eastern culture trying to interpret like Western food. So it was like a hot dog with like milk bread. So like Jeffrey grew up in West
Mhm.
Virginia and I grew up in Hong Kong, but after school we were eating like kind of the same thing. And that's like the beauty of like discovering things about each state is because of immigration and because like this country is built on like so many different people traveling here and
Right.
like bringing all their cultures and tastes and flavors that you'll find connections like that even in the most random places. Like, would you ever say like you would off the top of your head find a connection between West Virginia and Hong Kong? Like probably not, but like
Right.
through food you can, which is kind of the beautiful thing about it. But
Yeah.
yeah, so a lot of research, a lot of I know a lot of fun facts. If anybody needs a trivia partner, I'm probably really good.
Really
But
good.
yeah, like that's kind of how I started each state. But then some states I just threw all caution to the wind because
Mhm.
I'm a home baker and because I am not like too serious about anything that I bake. Like I want it to be fun. Like Nevada is an all you can eat buffet pie, which is absolutely wild, but you know, it's my book, so I could do whatever I wanted.
Right. Now, speaking of that, you just recalled a question that I had. Pie sometimes can be very technical,
Yes.
particularly the crust, right?
Yes.
That's always the thing. Have you ever in your research or in your travels had someone say, well, this is my trick, my tip on how to make the best crust or filling? And have you picked up on any of those things that you can share with all of us that might want to perfect the dough? And as well as, do you have any rules when pie, or do you throw caution to the wind with all your baking?
So I think the best advice I can give anybody when they're like trying their hand at making pie, especially crust, because like that's what makes pie pie, right? Is the crust, is to just chill in like the literal sense and also using your fridge. Like your fridge is kind of like your most important tool when you're making pie. Like you want the butter to stay cold. And like if you run really warm and your hands are warm, like and you feel things are getting soft, just put it in the fridge. Like it's not that deep. Like just use your fridge. Like put it in like 10 minutes at a time, come back to it. Like
Mhm.
that's kind of like a great like tip. And also another thing that you can do is with the liquid that you're adding, you can just use water that's like ice cold, or you can add like vodka or apple cider vinegar or something
Really?
to it. And basically, this is like kind of like the fun technical part of baking. Like vinegar and alcohol will burn off in the oven first before water, which will kind of like guarantee that your crusts will like puff up and get flaky. So that's like another fun tip. But yeah, like if you think that making crust is too stressful, Pillsbury makes a wonderful store-bought pie crust. And if you can take any stress that's in your already stressful life out, like I don't want pie to be a stressful thing. So if you just want to focus on one thing, like making the filling, or you want to buy the filling and just focus on the crust, like you do you. It's your life. It's just pie, you know?
Yeah, I love that because some people are like, no, you have to make it from scratch. Like you cannot cheat, and get it
There's
out.
no pie police. Like it's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you back into the book with your story and everything, you mentioned your grandfather, and you kind of described him in so many details and your memories of him. Can you kind of describe to us the flavor of the pie? It was so beautiful in the picture that reminds you of him.
So with the book, so the book to like really rewind, I started this project, 50 Pies, 50 States, a long time ago. I think now we're at like 8 years ago. And I was slowly working through the states. And when I ended up getting my book deal for it, which was really wonderful, I thought it'd be fun to have some pies that came before the 50 states so that you got to know me a little bit. There are pies for Singapore, Hong Kong, Indonesia, and Savannah and Brooklyn, where I live now. And kind of like I call it the first 3 dates with me. Like you're going on 3 dates with me to figure out if you want to go on a road through 50 states. And so for the Singapore pie, I did a pandan custard pie. Pandan is kind of it's a green leaf and it makes this like bright fluorescent green color, which is natural. And it has like kind of a vegetal coconutty taste. And it's something that's like very common in Southeast Asian like desserts. And the crust is made out of Kongguan custard crackers. And there are these crackers from this like really famous, I guess it would be the Nabisco of Singapore, but like everybody has Kongguan biscuits like in their pantries or like in the supermarkets, like you can get it everywhere. But I lived in Hong Kong, my grandpa lived in Singapore, and whenever I would go home, there would be this metal tin of these Kongguan like custard biscuits that I would eat all the time. And I was always so excited to see my grandpa. Me and my sisters were the last set of grandkids. So by that time, like he was so over it. Like, there's so many of us, but like
Yeah.
would have to catch him up on all the toddler hot goss when I got back to Singapore. So I'd
Mhm.
talk and I at first was
You
like,
have
oh,
to slow down the talking.
yeah, it's because he loves me and wants to give me the snack, but really it was so my mouth was full and I couldn't talk anymore. But like those are like fun memories I had with him. And like I got such little time with him, but like all that time was like so precious. So how could I like immortalize that? And it wasn't even like a big Chinese New Year dinner or like all these banquets we ate. It was like just this one little biscuit. And it's like these little things like when you're a kid that like really stick with you. So
Mhm.
yeah. And he's best. He was really tall too.
Was
My
he?
grandpa was 6'3", so he was like really fun.
Wow, he was.
He was really fun to hug. Yeah.
Awesome. And then, so staying with your family, I know you were talking about in your book that your dad was also a big influence on your life, and also like with his job and having to move around a lot. And I remember the story in particular that I really loved of like arguing and rushing to like stir his coffee and things. And I believe there's a pie for him as well. But what was his favorite slice of pie? And how
My
does he
dad,
feel about your
my
pie
dad
journey?
actually has not eaten a pie that I've baked, which is kind of funny
Really?
because I live really far away from home. My dad lives in
Mhm.
Singapore. And in Singapore, we don't have an oven in our kitchen. It's not very common to have ovens. Um, and yeah, so my dad has never eaten a pie that I've baked, which is kind of funny, but my dad's eaten a lot of food that I've cooked. So around
Okay.
the age of 12, my dad had a very extensive cookbook library from like being like going to a lot of restaurants and working in the hotel industry. I took over Sunday dinners. And so like we always like talk through a menu and he would take me to the supermarket and I could cook whatever I wanted. Like it was like a
Mhm.
12-year-old me being like, I would love to make duck à l'orange. And he'd be like, okay, we can go get a duck. And I think that's like the beauty of my dad's parenting is that we really had no rules, which is kind of crazy coming from a Chinese household. But it also, because we had no rules, like gave us a lot of time to think about making decisions. Like I was like, oh, like I have all this freedom, so I don't want to like abuse this freedom. Like, should I stay out till 2 a.m. as a 16-year-old? Probably not. Like, I'll go home because like, yeah, home is fine. It's like he gave us a lot of like good rules that like kind of
Mhm.
taught us how to make great decisions. And I mean, even when I started getting a lot of tattoos, all my dad would say to me was like, if you're nice to people and you can pay your rent, like that's fine.
That's
You'll
nice.
live. Yeah.
You had a lot of insight at 16. I don't know if I would have made such decisions. Growing up in the 80s with similar lack of
Rules.
rules there. Um, in all your moving and all the places that you've stayed in and lived in your upbringing, which country do you think has been the most influential? Not the US.
Not the US.
Hmm.
I feel like it would be Hong Kong. Like I was born in Singapore, but barely lived there. Like when I lived there, I was so little. Like Hong Kong had such an influence on me because it was like one city, it was like one country, two systems. Like it felt like we were in the Western world, but living in the East. And there was like, it was a city, but it was so safe. Like we were taking public transportation when we were like 12, and the city had like its bustling like skyscrapers and stuff that everybody knew. But where I lived in Hong Kong was like all like beaches and like waterfalls and like fun hiking and stuff. And so, yeah, like I feel like the freedom of being able to live in a city that had all that access, like really made me like very independent and like very grown up, like much younger than maybe another person. But yeah, it has to be Hong Kong. And since you knocked out the US, I mean, the US has had the most impression on me ever. But yeah, it would be Hong
Had to
Kong.
throw a curveball in
I
there.
know we love a curveball,
Yeah.
like a
And
snowstorm.
yeah, right, exactly. So speaking of the US, I actually have a question. It's not mine, it's actually from one of my participants.
Love.
As I work with immigrants and refugees. So I'm gonna read it because I want to make sure I capture their voice accurately and their words. So they had a question because we talked about your book too as well. And they loved it. So they wanted to know, in the immigration journey, immigrants often hear stories about the US or what constitutes being an American. One being the American pie, for example. What stories or information did you hear, if any, about the American experience with pie? Was it a symbol? Which pie stood out? Did you hear any stories about like our food world before you decided to move to Georgia?
Oh, 100%. I mean, pie is so symbolic with American culture. Um, it's something like there's songs about it, people talk about it, like the whole like statement is American is apple pie. And
Hmm.
through like the research of pie in this country, even in times of like desperation, whether it's like the Great Depression or seasonal depressions like in the winter months, in America pie has always found a place on the table, which is something that's like so, I guess it's like so tender and so wonderful that this one
Hmm.
dessert was so important to everybody that even like during the Great Depression, there was the water pie, which is like pie made with like water and sugar. And I
Hmm.
made it and it literally tastes like pie filled with Krispy Kreme donut glaze, which is pretty delicious. And
Wow, I have to try that.
yeah, and like in Appalachia, there's the vinegar pie, which is supposed to mimic like the tartness of apples. And it's because like pie has become like a symbol for like abundance in this country. Like, pie sitting in the window in your perfect home, or like pie on the 4th of July, or pie on your Thanksgiving table, like when you're like being thankful for like the country that you're in and the people that you're with. Like it's it's the most American thing with its origins in Germany, which is kind of funny. You know what I mean? Like even
Hmm.
the thing that is symbolically so American is something that someone else brought to this country, which yeah, there's so many layers to that. It's like a lasagna of feelings.
Hmm.
But yeah, like the symbol is just that it's like abundance in this country, which is so wonderful. And like I came here and everything about America that I love is not really about like the mountains or the snow or anything else. It's the people. Like the people that I have met here has made this country my home. The America that I know is the relationships that I've built while I've been here. Like that's my America, and everybody's America is a little bit different, and that's totally fine. But yeah, my America is filled with pie and very wonderful people that have made it my home. So that's my America.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we're all here in Colorado. all snug and warm, so I have to ask.
Yep.
Bison and core stew pie for
Mhm.
Colorado. Why did you pick that one? And if you can describe it for everyone.
Of course. So it's a bison stew pie made with Coors beer from Golden, Colorado. The pie was dedicated to my friends Emily Folsky and Dan. And Dan grew up in Golden, Colorado, and I also drank a lot of Coors in college. And I thought it'd be like kind of fun to like combine those two things. And again, like make a little nod to like a steak and kidney pie that I grew up with eating in pubs. So yeah, it had to be that. And also like how delicious would it be to like spend a whole day on a mountain and then end your day eating like a nice meaty pie, you know? So that's kind of
Mhm.
like the concept that I had.
It kind of reminds me of like camping and the sun setting and the Rockies in the back. And we're gonna
Yeah.
get to Q&A, so maybe someone can answer that, and I will read it. So I have like two more questions for you. One is, which pie represents home for you, and where do you call home? Are you home?
I feel like home is like such a funny concept. I feel home is wherever I am or wherever my dog is, I guess, because I love my dog so much. But like, yeah, like home used to be like a physical place, but home is like with the people that I love. Like right now, I'm in Colorado with a couple of my best friends, and like this is my home right now. You know, it's like
Mhm.
it's just a feeling that you have like inside of you. It's not really a physical place. And that's kind of something that I learned by like doing this journey through the 50 states, by like really understanding my relationships with all the different places that I grew up. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, like home is more of a like mindset than it is a thing.
Yeah, I love that a lot. So it's really tied to all the people and the experience, it sounds like,
Yeah.
your experiences with people over a tangible area. So I'm opening the chat here, and I have some interesting suggestions for you from Palisade Peach Pie, which sounds
Okay.
delicious. We have Rocky Mountain Oyster Pie.
I know what those
As always, add some green chili to
are.
anything, especially now when it's really cold. But let me go back. If you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I'm going to scroll back just a little bit to see if there's any a little bit back in our conversation here. Someone had a question, and maybe you could just chime in your thoughts. But the question is, how do I help the immigrants I serve? What kind of help or any
Where it's like if they need a little help understanding like if English is their second language, right? Like be like applying for like any forms, any visas is so complicated. And just like any support you can give there. Like I have helped like other people that have gone helping them gather information, which I feel like is the hardest thing to do sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I cannot stress how difficult and how laborious the visa process is in this country to become a permanent resident. And that's why I started this project too, to like give me a tether and a reminder about why I was going through all this trouble and spending
Mhm.
all this money. And it was like because of all these people that have made this place my home, I fought so hard to stay here. And I think that's something that like everybody should like keep in the back of their minds with like people that are immigrating here or want to immigrate to the States. Like there is a good reason. It's
Right.
because they're like trying to find like a sense of like safety and home. And so any way that you can help to facilitate that, like you should.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. And it can be quite a lonely and confusing journey if
Yeah,
you don't have
exactly.
a support system and a welcoming several faces, right? And encouraging words that it seemed that you had in
Yeah, like
your journey.
give them a reason to stay here, right? Like why do they
Right,
want to be here? And it's like, oh, it's because like we love you, we support you, and like we want to be there for you. So yeah, that's
right.
because yeah,
Making
immigration.
them feel at home.
Yes, exactly. You
Awesome.
can make
And
them a pie from the cookbook.
yes. So there's quite a few questions that just came
Right.
in. So here's
Let's
another
go.
one. Besides the refrigerator, what is your favorite two tools in the kitchen?
Ooh, two tools. Okay. So the kind of I feel like I can give you one tool that's like the most multi-purpose very simple, very wonderful tool, and it's the bench scraper. You can use your
Ooh,
bench
love it.
scraper to cut butter up when you're making pie. You can use your bench scraper to like distribute flour. You can use your bench scraper to pick things up that you've cut and put it in your bowl. You can use your bench scraper to like clean everything up. Like your bench scraper is like the absolute like workhorse of your kitchen that everybody forgets about. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
The
It's not
tool you didn't know you needed until you have
exactly,
it.
exactly. It's not very glamorous, but yeah, it's great. My favorite one is from Lamson Cutlery, and I actually splurged a little bit on it because it has a walnut handle, but I do make pie
Ooh,
all the time. So
yeah, I like
yeah.
that. Another question. I've heard on baking shows, how do you avoid the soggy bottom?
Okay, so the best way to avoid the soggy bottom is something that I learned when I was baking at 420 Blackbirds, and that's with a little bit of crust dust. So
Oh,
crust dust is basically kind of equal parts sugar and flour, and you can do this with savory pies too because you won't really taste it. And that if you kind of like you roll out your bottom crust, you put it in the pan. If you just sprinkle about a teaspoon of flour and a teaspoon of sugar at the bottom and kind of swirl it together, that kind of makes like a little barrier
okay.
for like putting your filling in. And also if you're doing a fruit pie, like letting your fruit macerate for a little while and then using a slotted spoon when you're filling your pie, because
Get
then like all that
the
extra
juice
juice
off,
will
the
fall
extra.
out. Yeah.
Hmm.
Those are my two soggy bottom tips. Paul
Awesome.
Hollywood would be
Avoid
proud.
the soggy bottom. I love that.
Yeah.
During this process, is there anything you learned about the US or pie that surprised you?
I think it was more like ingredients that surprised me. Like I'd never ever heard of a prickly pear before. And when I did Arizona, it was a prickly pear pie. And I think another thing that really surprised me, I don't know if it's a good way or in a good way or a bad way, was when I got to South Dakota. And I was like talking about like what food I could interpret into a pie. I ended up talking to a bunch of historians that live in the Black Hills in South Dakota.
Mhm.
And the pie is based on the Sioux Nation's like native cuisine. So it's like, I kind of like interpretate it was like a wild rice pudding with like sunflower milk with like maple sunflower, like little crunchies on top and like a berry
Oh,
bergamot
yeah.
sauce. So, but then it kind of made me think about how like I grew up in Hong Kong and I can get like Cantonese and Szechuan cuisine and Korean cuisine like anywhere I want. I can order it, Vietnamese, whatever. But why can't I also do that with Native American cuisine? Like
Mhm.
why doesn't everybody have access to that? And that's like of course a much longer and larger conversation than we have
Right.
for today. But that's something that kind of like stumped me or surprised me when I was going through the States was the lack of access to that or being able to try that.
Of different ingredients. Yeah.
Yeah.
Another question here is your pies are so creative, combining so many things that I wouldn't have thought would be pieable. Can anything be put into a pie?
Anything can be put into a pie. Like, and it's just kind of like looking at pie in a different way. I feel like, in America, people think of pie one way, a sweet treat,
Hmm.
right? When really it can be a savory thing, like I grew up with. And how can you like interpret different elements of food that you like into a different form? It's just like thinking about a thing outside of a circular pie shell. And I feel like that's
Right.
like always a fun exercise for anybody is to like think about how someone else would feel in this situation or like someone would eat this food in a different way. Yeah, anything can pie, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. The flavor combinations are endless and the
Yes.
creativity. And this is an excellent question. We are ready. We are so ready. Are you going to write another book? Will pie be your medium or something else?
So it's really funny. I feel like I get asked a lot what's next and if I'm going to write another book. My book hasn't even been out a year yet. And I'm kind of still like relishing and enjoying like that this book is out in the world. Like that's so wild to me. And it's like led me
Mhm.
to really amazing opportunities like talking to all of you. And so yeah, I'm just kind of enjoying the moment right
Enjoy
now.
the moment.
The book took 2 years to put together. So yeah, I'm just enjoying it right now. We'll see if there's a book two in me. There probably is. But yeah, for right now, I'm just really enjoying myself.
So, well, if you're considering it when you're ready, there was a suggestion in here that says pies of the world. So
Oh, pies
maybe
of the world.
a part
Yeah.
two can expand on that
My
journey.
my photo team, for the photo shoot, and I were joking that I should do pies of Bora Bora. So my publisher has to pay for us to go to just Bora Bora for a month. Yeah.
That is awesome. Write it off. It
Write
is
it off,
a work
exactly.
expense. Were there any pies that you wanted to include in the book, but for page and all that stuff, you had to trim it down? What got left out?
Nothing got left out. All the pies that I wanted in were in. I will say I am a card carrying Virgo. I'm very organized. So I have the entire book already laid out. And I fought really hard for the extra pies to get in there. I fought really hard for like pies to be a certain way. So yeah, it is the book that I wanted to be out in the world. I'm very proud of it.
Here's another one. Everyone has a lot of wonderful questions. Thank you. Keep them coming. Here we go. You've made so many new pies recently on social media. Any of those new ones that stand out as a favorite for you?
I released a recipe this morning to celebrate Pie Day. It's a miso mushroom pot pie. I wanted something that was like kind of like an umami bomb, but was like vegetarian because I'm trying to eat a little less meat. And yeah, I will say, very delicious. It has 5 kinds of mushrooms in it and like a little bit of white cheddar and like balsamic vinegar and soy sauce and a little bit of miso. So it's like really, really savory. But I made a little like parsley and lemon zest salad to eat with it to kind of like cut how like fatty everything might feel. So yeah, that's probably my current fave.
That sounds delicious. I know what I'll be checking out your social media when we get done. Here's another question. As a Georgia native and now Colorado resident, sometimes I miss the South, especially Publix bakery bread.
Oh,
What do
yeah.
you miss most about your time in Georgia?
What do I miss most about my time in Georgia? Probably how easy it was for me to get grits, like cheesy grits. I
And
found
yeah, good
out
grits.
good grits, right? We had a conversation about good grits, but
Hmm.
yeah, like for me growing up, I always ate congee, which is like a rice porridge.
Hmm.
And from my time living in Georgia, I found out that like I ate a lot of grits while living there. It gives me the same feeling of like comfort and home when I'm feeling like a little like homesick or something. Like congee and grits have become like this, it holds the same place in my heart for comfort. So yeah, I think that's probably what I miss the most from the South is grits and a good biscuit. It's hard to find a good biscuit.
Yes, yes. Have you
Yeah.
been able to find a good bowl of congee in New York at least?
Yes. Like it's so funny if you go to Flushing in New York and Queens, you can
Hmm.
eat truly all of the best Chinese cuisine and it's because of everybody that's immigrated over.
Yeah, and there's never enough time. I actually stayed there a couple of years ago.
There's
It
never
is
enough time.
amazing. Yeah,
Never
so
enough
many
stomach
places.
space.
What is another favorite thing for you to cook or bake besides pie?
Besides pie. Um,
Hmm.
I love cooking, like in general, but baking wise, like my roommate's so good at making cookies, so that's kind of like her thing. But when it comes to cooking, like I just love like experimenting, like whether it's like different pastas or different noodles. Or my friend Hetty McKinnon wrote a book, Tender Heart, and it's all like vegetable focused cooking. And then
Hmm.
she also wrote a book called To Asia with Love, and that kind of has helped me discover all these recipes that like I wanted to learn how to cook, but there was no recipe for it, because like a
Right.
lot of the times like moms and grandmas in immigrant homes like don't write things down. They more like flavor with like feeling. And so like it's
Right.
kind of nice to like rediscover all this food that I ate as a kid and like make it again.
Do you find that you have more creativity and flexibility when you're cooking versus baking?
No.
Okay. It's more of a chef question. I mean, some people are like
Yeah,
one or the other, and they're like, well, with cooking, I can be more creative and, season until the voices stop telling me,
exactly.
tell me to
These are your
stop kind of
ancestors
thing.
shut up. Yeah.
Right,
But it's
right.
like, I think with crust, you kind of have to be pretty serious, right? Because you need it to go a
Mhm.
certain way. But with the fillings, you can get a little wild.
Awesome. Let's see. There's some about the recording. Do you recommend high altitude adjustments for us? Renee splits her time between 5280 and 9,000 square feet. So do you have any baking tips for that
You
variation
will
there
probably have to bake it a little longer. Like, you know how
longer?
water takes a little longer to boil. And that's also a thing that I think everybody needs to keep in mind when they like read a recipe that's like on the New York Times or like in a cookbook. Like things were tested at a certain altitude, right? Or like in
Hmm.
a certain kind of oven. And so like sometimes you might have to bake something for like 5, 10 minutes longer than what the recipe says. But like the best part about like cooking and baking is like you're relying also a lot on like touch and smell and like look.
Hmm.
So yeah, if it still looks a little raw to you, it probably is still a little raw.
A little raw.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you ever experimented with vegan pies?
I have not. There are lots of people that do that, and it's not me. Like it's I am a all butter girl, and like maybe I would try, but there's so many great vegan bakers out there that yeah, I'm sorry, I'm an all butter girl.
Let them have it.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, I've had quite a few delicious vegan pies, but haven't had a chance to experiment just yet. It's like a
Yeah.
whole new skill set to get some of the same flavors and things. Here's a really good question. What kind of pie would you be if you would be a pie? Which one would you be?
God, that's so tough. I feel like the pie that I felt the most understood was the pie that I made for Brooklyn. So I made a pie that's based on my bagel order. And it's a poppy seed crust with like a scallion cream cheese, like eggy center. And it has smoked salmon, red onions, and like thinly sliced lemons on top. So I feel like probably that one describes me the best. A little bit salty.
A little bit
Sometimes,
salty.
yeah.
Always okay to be a little bit salty. That sounds like a breakfast,
Exactly.
lunch, and dinner kind of pie. Any
Yeah.
time of day kind of pie.
Mhm.
Here's another question. You're invited to the White House to make one pie. It's a huge moment. Which pie do you make?
I make an apple pie. You want to come in just like you don't come in too hot. You're at the White House, like you're welcome for my presence. My presence is a present. But yeah, it
Mhm.
would be like the best apple pie that I could conjure up is what I would bring to the White House. Like I feel like sometimes people get lost in all the like bells and whistles, but yeah,
Hmm.
like what would be more symbolic than someone that immigrated to this country bringing an apple pie into the
A
White House.
classic.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And I'm still looking through the all the recipes myself, but here's a question here. Are any of the states rhubarb?
No, no rhubarb. I've also gotten a lot of hot contention because there isn't a sweet potato pie in there.
Oh
I
no.
know. I know. I know. Maybe we'll have to make an addendum. But yeah, no rhubarb, even though strawberry rhubarb pie is one of my favorite pies to eat in the summer.
Awesome. And then here's a question here. Do you remember the House of Pies?
What's the House of Pies? Maybe was that before I moved to the States? Is that a place?
I'm not sure. Maybe someone can put it in the chat because I don't remember myself.
Okay. Well,
While we wait for someone to put in the chat, hopefully,
yeah.
how do you feel about what a pie said about its state? How did you feel about what a pie said about its state?
What do you mean?
I guess it's
Like,
I think I'll interpret of how I'm seeing it. You selected each pie and it represents each state.
mhm.
Why do they represent each state? What kind of feeling did you get when you were selecting these?
Okay, so I felt like I wanted it to capture like a state food or fruit, but also be a pie that I would deem craveable and want to eat. And also, I wanted the person that I was dedicating the pie to want to eat that pie as well. So it was kind of like a lot of moving parts, but I always first thought like, would this state be best represented as a savory pie or a sweet pie? And then that's kind of how I went.
How the process went. Awesome. How did you get into doing pie crust portraits? You've got a George Washington and a Dolly Parton in the book. Forget lattice work. The portraits are wild.
I needed to really flex that I got an art school degree. I needed to prove to my dad about why I needed to go to design school. But no, I thought it'd just be like a fun way to like jazz things up because like you honestly like you eat with your eyes first. And because like I am a designer, I thought about what the pie would look like visually at the end. And so for Tennessee, it's a sausage and gravy pie because that's one of Dolly Parton's favorite foods. And Tennessee is dedicated to my true love, Dolly Parton. And so I decided to immortalize her in pie crust by, like making her little face with it. Eating Dolly Parton was kind of funny. But yeah, like all the templates for all my portraits that I did in pie crust are all like in QR codes in the book. So you can also attempt to make Dolly Parton at home.
There's quite a few questions, so I'll go a little quicker. As a New Yorker and immigrant, do you refer to pizza as pie, or do you just call it pizza?
I just call it pizza.
Pizza. Awesome. And then, were there any surprises as you were making this book?
Any surprises?
Mm-hmm. Anything you found surprising in your research, or
How many I guess like how much Eastern European influence there is in the Midwest with like the meat and potatoes or like certain things where I was like, oh, like this pie is because there were all these miners that came over from England. Like that was Montana. And yeah, it was just like discovering how much influence immigrants had on building this country and like the food and the tastes and the flavors. And I feel like in my heart of hearts, I already knew that, but it was fun to find out more.
find out more? Awesome. Oh, we have the answer. House of Pies used to be a shop on Hamden in the 70s.
Oh.
So we'll have to do a little research on
Yeah.
that. In the meantime, what's a funny example of a passionate reader that had strong opinions about how you got it wrong? Can you give us a
Um,
story?
well, there have been a lot of well, okay, the beauty of America is that people are very proud to be American and they're very passionate about the state that they're from. I think a lot of people have trouble with the states where I've gone like a savory route because they've only thought about their states like, oh, like New Jersey is blueberries. But for New Jersey, I made it based on Taylor ham, egg, and cheese, which is like a breakfast sandwich that's like synonymous with New Jersey. So yeah, it's mostly stuff where people are like, you got it wrong, but like I did it for me, but maybe I did for them, but I wrote this book for me. So, yeah.
Here you go. Awesome. I think we have time for a few more questions, but while they are popping up, there's quite a few reminiscent memories of the House of Pies going on in the chat
Ooh,
here.
love, love.
But here's a question: is pizza a pie? I think you answered it, but can I tell my husband to stop calling it a pie?
No, your husband can do whatever he wants.
The debate continues. Do you have a pie fail story that you can share with us?
When I first started baking pie, I was baking my way through the 4 and 20 Blackbirds cookbook that my best friend Patrick bought me. And I made some terrible, terrible pie crusts. Like they were disgusting. But I think the thing with like baking and cooking, it's you have to fail. And like not everything is always going to come out perfect. And you have to be okay with that. And that's kind of like also how you like learn to be a better cook, learn to be a better human being in the world. It's just through pie crust, I learned like, okay, like even if it's bad, like I'm gonna learn for next time how to fix certain things. And so yeah, the fails were definitely like a first few pie crusts that I made in the beginning were absolutely terrible. They were gooey messes, but
But
yeah,
all the part of the journey, all the part of
exactly.
the
Exactly.
process, and a
Yeah.
fun process. Who doesn't want to keep sampling?
Yes.
Um, Here's a really great question. How do you feel about hand pies?
I feel great about hand pies. I'll never say no.
Never say no. Never turn down a hand pie.
It turned out a hand pie. It's a portable snack.
Yeah,
Like a lot of my favorite things are portable snacks. Hand pies, rice balls, corn dogs. Yeah.
everything, all the above. How about galettes?
Gillette's wonderful. You guys should check out. There is this wonderful recipe developer named Rebecca Ferkshire, and she has a Gillette cookbook coming out next year, and I'm very excited.
Awesome. We have to keep an eye out for that release there. Still waiting for one more question, maybe. In the meantime, do you have any favorite pie baker or baker in general crush? Any favorites?
Any favorites? I feel like the queen of pie for me is Erin Jean McDowell. She wrote a book called The Book on Pie, and I've learned so many wonderful tips and techniques from her. And I think that the best pie in New York City is from 4 and 20 Blackbirds. I am very biased because I did bake there for a long time. So yeah, if you ever find yourself in the city, go get yourself a slice of the salted caramel apple pie at 4 and 20 Blackbirds.
That sounds delicious. And one final question for me is if you had to only eat one pie, you know it's coming, which one would you pick?
For the rest of my life,
Yes.
apple, because I could eat it as a sweet pie a la mode with ice cream, or I could eat it with cheddar cheese, which is something they do in Vermont because a pie without the cheese is like a kiss without the squeeze. And so, yeah, it could be savory or sweet. So it's going to be apple.
Awesome. And I see cheddar is in here too. And as we start to end our lovely, wonderful conversation, I feel like I could talk to you forever, especially when it I. Is
Yeah.
there any last words or theme or just any last talking point that you really want people to get out of your book?
I feel like just give it a shot. Try making a pie. It you might fail the first time and that will be totally okay. And it is such a fun process and it's such a fun process to do with other people and yeah, you at the end of it even if you like fail at a certain point, you get a pie to eat. And how wonderful is that, you know? So yeah,
That
give
sounds
it a shot.
wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm going to slide this one real quick. Any other pieisms
Any other pieisms? Not really.
or puns? I'm a sucker for food puns.
Oh, I'm a sucker for food puns too. But yeah, no, only that, crust the limit, right? Like anything can be pie.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for making the travel. I'm so excited that you were the lucky one before all the flights
I know,
started to
I know.
get
I'm so, so happy to
canceled.
be here. Thank you guys so much for spending this hour on the snowy evening with me. And yeah, if you want like more fun tips and recipes, they're mostly on my Instagram, 50 Pies, 50 States. And yeah, if you would like a book, the Bookies is selling them and I will sign them for you.
Awesome. So get right on it. The link was posted several times. If you want your signed copy, I have a copy here, and it really is a delight to read over and over. Even my husband was enjoying it as well. So we
I love
definitely
that.
have our lineup going on, and we will have a lot of fun pie making nights. There's the link up there again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us and spending time this evening. And I hope you all stay safe and warm and bunker down for another chilly night. And like Colorado says, it's going to probably be warm by Sunday, and
It'll
we'll
be
all be
warm by Sunday.
shorts
So
again.
you've got a lot of time to bake a pie. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of time to make a pie.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.